Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on what time you're watching this. So today I'm going to read chapters 5 and 6. So here is chapter 5. Eric, and what's his name? All right, hopefully this one's not too confusing. Remember in the first book, there were 3 Erics, Eric Bacon, Eric Ovens, and Eric Fry, but they were all called different names based on the perception that people had of them. All right. Oh, that's right, Eric. There are 3 Erics in Mrs. Jules's class, Eric Fry, Eric Bacon, and the other one who everyone always forgets, Eric Ovens. Eric Fry is strong and fast. He is usually the first one chosen for picking teams. Eric Bacon is funny, clever, and just a little bit sneaky. Everyone in Mrs. Jules's class likes him, but no one completely trusts him. Eric Ovens is kind, quiet, and 100% trustworthy. Sadly, that kind of person is often overlooked. But not today, he thought as he sat at his desk patiently waiting for Mrs. Jules to finish taking attendance. Today would be his day of glory. In his pocket was a plastic bag with 83 nail clippings. 2 numbers had been written on the blackboard, 71 and 2,677. So far, the class had collected a total of 2,677 nail clippings. 71 were the most brought in by any one kid. They didn't have to be toenails. Fingernails counted too. Eric Ovens took his bag out of his pocket and placed it on his desk. "How many you got?" whispered Kathy, who sat next to him. Eric didn't want to jinx his big day by saying the number aloud. Besides, he knew Kathy would only say something mean or mock him. Mrs. Jules closed her attendance book. "Anyone have any nail clippings this morning?" Eric Ovens raised his hand. "Yes, Eric," said Mrs. Jules. Eric Ovens quietly pushed back his chair, but before he could get up, he saw Eric Fry already making his way to the front of the room. 40, Eric Fry declared proudly. Eric Fry had kept his hand in his fist all morning. Everyone thought he was just trying to be tough. Now he opened his fist and let 40 nail clippings fall into the collection bucket. "Well done, Eric," said Mrs. Jules. Everyone clapped their hands. Eric Ovens smiled as he clapped his hands too. 83 was more than double 40. Eric Fry did the math on the board. 2,677 plus 40 is 2,717. "Halfway to a million," cheered Stephen. "Not quite," Allison told him. "Anyone else?" asked Mrs. Jules. Again, Eric Ovens raised his hand, but Eric Bacon had already hopped out of his seat and was headed towards the front of the room. He handed Mrs. Jules a plastic bag full of nail clippings. 349, he declared triumphantly. The class went wild. Sherry gasped. Stephen fell out of his chair. Eric Bacon danced around Mrs. Jules's desk like a football player who had scored a touchdown. Mrs. Jules was skeptical of the spectacle. "I could count them," she'd warned. Eric stopped dancing. "Go ahead," he challenged her. Mrs. Jules stared Eric Bacon in the eye. Eric Bacon stared back. Mrs. Jules dumped the bag on her desk, so gross, and divided the clippings into 4 piles. She asked Damien, Allison, and John to help. They each took a pile, and then Mrs. Jules added their totals together. 349, she announced, just as Eric said. Again, everyone cheered, and Eric Bacon continued his victory dance. "How did you get so many?" Mrs. Jules asked him. Eric B. stopped dancing. "I went door to door asking my neighbors," he said. Everyone laughed. Leslie had sold wrapping paper door to door, but she couldn't imagine asking people for their toenails. "It's easier than asking for money," said Eric. Everyone was happy to donate. He erased the number 71 and put 349 in its place. Then he did the math. 2,717 plus 349 equals 3,066. Almost $1 million, Stephen called out. Not even close, muttered Allison. Mrs. Jules told Eric Bacon to take a Tootsie Roll Pop from her coffee can. He took one. Then, when she wasn't looking, he took another. Anyone else? Asked Mrs. Jules. Eric Evans sat glumly at his desk. Raise your hand, urged Kathy. Why bother, he muttered. Kathy got up from her seat and stood next to him. She grabbed Eric's arm and raised it for him. Eric Evans brought a whole lot, she announced. Bring them on up, said Mrs. Jules. He had no choice. It's just 83, he said, and then he emptied his bag into the nail bucket. That's the second most ever, shouted Kathy. She started clapping. She's like a whole new person. Amazingly, everyone else clapped too. They were still clapping as he did the math on the board. 3,066 plus 83 is 3,149. That's closer to $1 million, exclaimed Stephen. Everyone cheered. Even Allison couldn't argue with that. I liked that one, even though it was gross. All right, see you guys next.